there's some really interesting data that came out from, honestly, TrueCar, which we're not the hugest TrueCar fans. We'll be the first to admit it. You, because Pop's back on the dealership side, you've talked about TrueCar leads aren't necessarily the best leads that would ever come through. From the consumer side, you get told a price, it isn't the price. It's just a meh.
Yeah.
That being said, they have some really interesting data. We took it. We're going to look at it. It's about incentives, Pops.
Yes, I noticed some of the data yesterday, which I immediately shared with you, because it's proving a point, um, as to why it is that manufacturers, can get by with making fewer cars, but still keep their profits up.
And that's so one thing to mention here is we're getting into third quarter earnings season.
Yes.
And so we're going to hear from more and more of not only the dealership groups, but the automakers as well. And so, yeah, let's take a peek at this, Pops. The headline here, we put this back on the YAA website. So we'll get that in the chat here in just a moment. New car incentives are down 42% year over year. You wrote this morning, Dad. Damn,
I was busy.
You are busy, man. You were making intros and you were writing. So thank you.
I'm typing I'm working my fingers to the quick here from typing so hard.
Okay, so here's what's going on. For the third quarter, Q3 of 2021, Q3 of 2020, and Q2 of 2021, we have our year-over-year change and our quarter-over-quarter change for the incentives that are being outlaid. Let's look at this quarter-over-quarter change. So this is going to be this column versus this column real quick. GM quarter-over-quarter slashed their incentives over 30%. Hyundai over 25%. Nissan right there at nearly 24%. Pops, you can't be too surprised by this. If you remember, we were looking at some data about GM. They're struggling the most when it comes to maintaining inventory levels right now. No wonder they're cutting incentives.
Oh, and if you can't produce the number of cars that you want to produce, then you don't have to spend as much in the way of marketing dollars to sell the inventory that you do have. And so most of the manufacturers have figured out that they don't have to utilize nearly as much in the way of incentives to get the people to buy vehicles. And if that Mercedes-Benz that we were just talking about a few minutes ago is an example of that, sometimes people just want things and they'll pay for it. They'll pay way too much for it, but they'll pay for it. And so those that want and can't, for whatever reason, live without it, they don't need the extra incentive to go out and buy it. Now, my hope would be that will change going forward, but I think it'll be some time before it does.
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking, and I'll pull it back up on the screen here. We've got the article linked out. Let me hide that. We've got the article linked out, the magnesium shortage. So the latest and greatest on what's going to be plaguing production is the magnesium shortage. You can read about that here. It's really actually that's fascinating. China produces all of it, and well,
they don't produce all of it, but they produce like 85% of it. I mean, it's not like the United States doesn't produce magnesium. The problem is it's not like you can just say, hey, we're going to manufacture magnesium. No, it's a mineral that has to be mined, and it just works out that, I don't know, most of it in the world just happens to be in China. We have
that article. We have that article back on the site. Yeah. So take a peek there. But back on the back on the incentives front. We've got the quarter over quarter change year over year. What I want to look at, and we do have the inventory broken down by state as well, which is super fascinating. But what I want to look at here, Dad, is actually monthly changes, because this is where things get interesting. August versus September. Ford actually increased their incentive outlay by 20%. Subaru increased their incentive outlay by nearly 7%. Again, you've got GM on here who's decreasing like crazy because, well, they can't afford to be incentivizing anything because they have no cars. BMW dropping their incentives, Toyota dropping their incentives. But kind of crazy. Ford incentives are up and Subaru incentives are up.
But even though Subaru incentives might be up, they're still a relatively small dollar amount compared to the type of incentives that we used to see in the past. What was Subaru, like $1,400 some dollars on average? 2 years ago, that might have been $3,400 on average. So
Yeah.
even though Subaru felt the need to increase incentives in the month of September, and I don't know why they did with a 5-day supply of cars, it really dollars wise, percentage of sale wise is still minuscule compared to what it had been in the past.
But for the most part, we're seeing incentives go away. And also on the financing side, there's very few 0% financing deals out there right now. Ford is still offering it. I think Ram may have one out there. Those can be regionalized from time to time, but there's fewer dollar incentives and there's fewer financing incentives. And it's just something to be aware of, as the industry is continuing to shift and evolve. And quite frankly, Pops, you've said it here before on the channel. United States is one of the few places where there are incentives because there's this instant gratification. There's all the cars on the lot. Like we're really moving in a direction where we're going to be much more like other countries out there, Europe, et cetera, where there aren't as many incentives. And so, and
a greater
as we learn.
As we move forward, a greater percentage of cars sold will be cars that were actually ordered by the customer, like they do in Europe.